Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to talk about class variables, so basically variables that you define inside of a class. So in case you haven't watched my last video or you just don't remember, I have a little class here called student, which has an init method, which takes a name and an age. So every time I create an instance of my class, I have to give it a name and an age. And then I have my string representation, which says my name is, and then whatever I name my object, and I am, and then the age of my object, years old. And then I have this little method here that doesn't really do much. It just prints grade. Okay. So I want to build a grading system inside of my class. So I want to give each student, each instance of my class a grade. And then I want to have some method that returns the average grade. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a parameter grade to my init method. So self.grade equals grade, like so. And now I'm going to create a few instances of my class. So student, and this is going to be Mike. He's going to be 26, and his grade is going to be 90, for example. And now let me copy this a couple times, for example, 2 times, and let me change this to S2, and let me change this to S3, and this is going to be Mary. She's going to be 23. Her grade is going to be 87, and then this is going to be Max. He's going to be 25, and his grade is going to be 57. Okay, so now I'm going to start by creating two variables inside of my class, and these are going to be my class variables. So when you define variables inside of your class, usually do that in the beginning of everything. So before every method, you're going to create your variables. So I'm going to create a variable grades, which is going to equal an empty list. And now I'm going to append all of the grades of the instances I create to this list. Okay, so in the end, I'm going to have a list with all of the grades of my students. And then I'm going to create another variable called sum grades, which is going to start at 0. And then each time I create a student, I'm going to add that student's grade to sum grades. And then I'm going to divide sum grades by the length of grades. So I'm going to define the sum of all the grades by, the number of students. And that's how I'm going to get the average. So in here, I'm going to append the grades of my students to the list grades. Now, I can't just do grades.append and then in here self.grade. You can see that the computer doesn't recognize grades, right? It says that grades is not defined. Now, why does this happen? Because I have defined grades up here, right? So you have to actually specify, so you have to actually specifically tell the computer that this variable grades was defined inside of your class so that the computer knows that, okay, it sees grades and then it says, okay, I have to look for grades inside of the class because that's where it was defined and then I can use it. So how do you do this? Well, you can write student dot grades. Okay, so then the computer says, okay, that variable belongs to the class students, and then it goes up here to the class students and it says, okay, grades is defined up here, I can use it, I can modify it, etc. And it's just like when you import a module. So for example, when you import random and you want to use a functionality, for example, random.randint of the random module, you have to actually specify that randint is a method from random by writing random.randint. And when you do that, the computer knows, okay, this method belongs to this module. So I'm going to look inside of the module. It's going to find the method and it's going to be able to use it. Now, if you hadn't written this, even though I've imported the module, it doesn't know what randint is because it doesn't know where to look for it, okay? Now, you don't have to do this with the name of your class. You can also do this with an instance because an instance of your class has access to the variables that you define inside of your class. So instead of students or the name of your class, you can write self, right? And this, like I explained in the previous video, refers to the instance that you're creating. So this is actually going to say, okay, the instance that I'm creating has access to this variable, so I can use it. So up to this point, I defined two variables inside of my class, and then inside of my init method, I've appended each grade to my self.grades list. So since the init method is called automatically every time I create an instance, every time I create an instance, the grade of that instance is going to be automatically appended to the grades list. So that's how I'm going to append each grade to my grades list. Now, inside of my getGrades method, I'm going to calculate the average grade. So instead of getGrades, I'm actually going to call this getAverage, and I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to iterate through every grade in self.grade, so in my list of grades. And now I want to access my other variable, sum grades, and I want to add each grade to that variable so that I have the sum of all of the grades in my list. And now I'm going to calculate the average by writing average equals self.sum grades, which now is the sum of all my grades, divided by the length of my list self.grades. And lastly, let me just return average. Okay, so now I'm going to call this method on the last student I created. So s3.getAverage, getAverage, and now I'm going to run this, and you can see that this is going to print the average grade. And you can even access these variables from from outside of your class. So you can write, for example, print students dot grades, and if I run this, you can see that this is going to print the list of grades and then the average. And I can even modify students.grades from outside of my class. So I can write students.grades equals, and then just a list with a random integer in there. And now if I run this, you can see that this is going to print a list with 4 in there, and then the average is obviously also going to change. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope it was easy to understand. If this was valuable to you, if the video was helpful, please like and subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.